Welcome to Obey Your Strengths with Gallup Certified Strengths Coach, Kersten.
My name is Kersten, and I am a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach. I work with teams, individuals, and even organizations to help them utilize the theory of the StrengthsFinder framework and turn it into application within their relationships and businesses. I call myself the biggest strengths geek. I love to help strategic leaders think about how to get the most out of their employees when you focus on what's right with them versus what's wrong with them. StrengthsFinder is an online assessment that helps people identify their top 5 strengths. And when I say strengths, I really mean their patterns of talent. Your talent is your recurring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. They happen simply. You don't have to think about them. You don't have to try to use your talents. They just happen. You wake up on Saturday morning and they're there. Those talents become strengths through our lives when we invest in them. So when we talk about StrengthsFinder, many times in this podcast, we're going to refer to the actual strength name, like achiever, strategic, input, learner, just to give you a few examples. There's 34 strengths in the StrengthsFinder framework. Every podcast guest will share with us what their top 5 strengths are. And I encourage you to listen for themes of those strengths coming out in the stories they tell. I will try my best to point it out, but no doubt you're going to hear it on your own. There's a lot to come, and I'm super excited about it. And I just want to, sign off every single time we are on these podcasts with thinking, if you are wanting to win at life, if you want to have better relationships, you want to have a more fulfilling career, you want to be happier on a daily basis, you want to have more energy, man, you got to obey your strengths. That's it. Well, hi, Lorenzo.
Well, hi, Kathy.
Welcome to Obey Your Strengths. Thanks for being my first guest.
I'm so happy to be your first guest.
I have to remind our audience, because we know they know, but you are the author of the Cilantro Diaries, Business Lessons from the Most Unlikely Places. You're also the co-host of the Brand Brothers podcast, which is currently in my top 10 favorite podcasts.
Yes.
You should feel very
honored.
honored.
I'm honored.
You should. And most recently, you've been named the CEO of Geekdom Media. So welcome.
Which is a huge 2-person company. Huge.
But you're making waves, including these waves right here
right.
on this podcast.
Well, that's right.
Thanks.
One show at a time.
All right, CEO of Geekdom Media. Thanks for sponsoring Obey Your Strengths podcast.
We're delighted.
Can you tell me a little bit about the vision?
Yeah.
And how strengths fits into that?
Well, I think that there are so many things that I've learned, I would venture that you've learned as well from our days at Rackspace, and things that we were able to take advantage of just because of where we happened to be and who we happened to learn from and who we had access to. And I have felt just overwhelmingly blessed by it, that, I had access to people that I shouldn't have access to, or most people don't. And I think that the ideas like StrengthsFinders that we learned, these are... Graham once told a colleague of mine that, the idea of strengths is worth about $1 billion to Rackspace. And I thought, we learned it firsthand. I mean, we were in it. And so I think that it's very important for me through Geekdom Media to bring these amazing ideas to me, because to me, they're not just $1 billion ideas. They're world-changing. They're life-changing. Even if you don't start a $1 billion company, the ideas that we learn can change someone's life. They can change your business, whether it's one person or 10 people. And I think that we owe it to the universe to give them, to bring them to the masses. And so one of the ideas that I think is very important to me is strengths. And when I look at the strengths world, there's really one person that I go to, and it's Kersten. And so to me, I want Geekdom Media to be this company that brings these amazing ideas out to people, because I know these ideas will change. That will change their lives. They'll change their companies. And so, we're just putting bets on, on people and ideas. And so we've got some amazing podcasts. The Brand Brothers, is my favorite example, because I remember being in a meeting with Bill Schley and Graham and one other guy, and I thought, this is probably like $100,000 meeting, mm-hmm. and I'm getting to sit in the back and take notes. Like I felt guilty, and I thought, I want everyone to hear what I'm hearing right now, because it's injustice that I get to hear this and no one else does. And so, you know what? I'm going to bring it to them for free with a podcast.
It's so awesome. I have 10 years of doing strengths coaching. I've got hundreds of stories about the way people's lives have changed for the better through strengths, including my own very personal story. It's very personal to me, obviously, because it's mine.
Yeah,
my story, right? That how I have improved my life, my marriage, my mothering, my business, everything through strengths. So I'm a believer, and I can't wait to share that over this podcast opportunity because
and also
really
that's why I'm so excited to partner with you, is because I know that to me the way people learn are through stories. And you have, how many years have you been doing strengths?
Yeah, since 2008.
So you have 10 years of stories, real world, right? People doing real things at all level, small, large, for-profit, non-profit. And to me, that's what I'm the most excited about, is that through your stories that you're going to bring to life in this show, I think people will learn and they will resonate and people will gravitate and they'll go, oh my God, I didn't think it was for me, but that story is just like what I'm going through right now. And I think that's what changes people. And so that's what I'm so excited, because I think that these are the ideas that change things. And so I can't wait to unleash them.
Yeah. So let me share one with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Tell me.
Let me tell you a story. When I first became a strengths coach within the walls of Rackspace, my job was to do StrengthsFinder training and StrengthsFinder team workshops. And so I was in HR. I was the HR gal, right, that took her little StrengthsFinder toolkit around the company and got people to buy in. And for a long time, it just felt like a framework. I mean, I knew these things, these words, these top 5, or if we were looking at our top 10, I knew they described us, but I wasn't sure how they were encouraging any change or improvement in life besides making us just work better together.
Right.
And to be in the know on the shared language, right? And one day I was sitting in a strengths class. I was teaching a strengths class, and one of the guys in the strengths class, at the end of the thing, I asked for an honorable closing, and I said, which is just code for say, tell me how great you love this class. give me the tidbits of what you learned today. And this gentleman, I'll keep his name secret. He's in my heart. He said, he in front of the whole class, he said, you know, Kathy, whenever I joined Rackspace, I was a help desk racker. That's what they call employees at Rackspace, or rackers. And he said, and then I took the StrengthsFinder, and I realized that my entire life I have been thinking that these strengths were liabilities. Wow. And as a matter of fact, my father made me think that these strengths didn't have any value at all.
Oh,
and so whenever I learned my top 5 strengths, and I learned what they look like in a strength mode and how to be productive with them, I decided to go get my CCNA, which, you know, like, right? That's the network security certificate, CCA or CCNA.
I think it's CCNA.
Sorry, I'm an HR girl.
That's all right.
Living
Cisco.
in the tech world.
No, that's a big deal.
So he had just finished. He had just passed that certification. He had just got an entry-level job on the security team. Guess what that meant for his paycheck?
Oh.
He doubled it. And I said, well, that's the power of strengths,
that's
people.
The power of
and I'm out. And I bowed and I dropped
the mic. And it's like.
And I said, look what HR's doing. No.
That's amazing. But
that's the real, like, whenever he realized that these are patterns that everyone has been seeing him use, he saw these patterns in himself. He never thought about them from the strength-based way. So he was thinking, these are what's wrong with me.
Right.
Instead of realizing, because I'm not, Dad wants me to be someone else that I'm not.
Right.
But these are who I am, which probably was restorative and analytical, and who knows what Dad wanted. Woo, or competition or whatever. So, man, that was that's whenever I sat there, and I will never forget that story, because it meant the world to that guy and his family. Think about that.
Well, also, I think that one of the whys on why you're doing this show, which I think is very inspiring, is to really break down these myths that we have. I know that in another show you're going to talk about the myth of being well-rounded.
Yeah,
and I think that, to me, that is because that's like mental health. The whole notion that we've been scolded for the things we're bad at, and so we have a lot of guilt and shame over the things we're bad at, and it's like, actually, cut them loose, let them drift away in the ocean, and focus on those 2 A's that you got. That is what StrengthsFinder is about. And to me, I just thought because when I was at Rackspace, when you were given permission to acknowledge the bad and go, yeah, whatever, I think it's a very liberating notion. And I think that is what helps people go, you know what? I am good at that. And you know what? I'm not good at that. My 34th strength is competition. And oh man. And there later on you have a question that I can't wait to tell you the story about, because when I realized that competition, like I knew I'm the 6th of 7 kids. I grew up losing. And so I'm like, I'm so used to, I'm like, I'll sit this one out. I'm not, because my strengths are, I need some context. I need to fix something. I don't need to win.
I just want to have fun.
I just want to have
positivity.
Fun. Yes.
We're all winners.
Yes, we're all winners. Everybody gets a pair of boots. Justin's boots. Sorry, that's a rodeo reference for those people out there that don't get that.
Well, since we're talking about the why of this podcast, let's talk about how we named this podcast, because I think I'll be forever indebted to you for pulling out Obey Your Strengths from me. Let's talk about it. So the story goes from my perspective, and then you can talk about your perspective of it. About 8 years ago, I was in a meeting with Graham Weston, and as the leader of employee engagement, I had went straight to the top of the organization to find out why we were experiencing some attrition of old school rackers, right? So people who had been tenured 7+ years. We noticed a trend that many of them were leaving rack space, and I wanted to go find out from the man himself, the big guy,
right?
Graham, the oracle, as to what was going on in the culture and why we saw these people jumping ship. And he sat with me and he said, Kathy, let me tell you, there's 3 reasons why people leave companies. And whenever he said that, of course, I pulled out my pen.
Yep.
Because I've got a strategic input and learner. I'm going to write these down, and then I'm going to write a book about it. But those 3 things, right? He said, Kathy, people leave when they get a better deal. And at the time, we were getting poached like crazy, right? So if you get a deal, someone's headhunting you to give you a bigger pay, a bigger title, a more sexy project.
Yeah, work from home.
A sexier project, remote working, whatever. You would think about leaving your good deal for the bigger, better deal.
Right.
And he said, or they're going on an odyssey. And we saw so many rackers leaving to go on an odyssey, whether it was to start their own business, to become a rack space client, or to become a rack space vendor, right?
Being an entrepreneur is a journey.
Yeah, entrepreneurship. I mean, rack space was breeding entrepreneurs. And then finally he said, or they stopped obeying their strengths. And as a strengths coach, I stopped and said, wait, what? Obeying? Because what Gallup says is, you would expect Graham to say what Gallup says is they stop playing to their strengths, but he didn't say playing to your strengths. He said obeying your strengths. And so my ears perked up and I said, obeying your strengths?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And so then he goes into these examples of where if you find yourself on your career path in a way that you are unable to live out your strengths, and he gave me hard examples, which I'm going to share with you, that you cannot handle the internal dissonance of not obeying your strength, right? So let's talk about like competition, right?
Right.
So those who have competition, their top 5 have to compete.
That's right.
They wake up thinking about, who am I going to beat?
Right.
And it's always there. Even when they get to the top of their game or the top of the totem pole or the top of the sales metric or whatever it is,
what's next?
They have to have a new competitor.
Right.
And when they get to the top of the pile, and there's no other competitor, it gets very boring. And that boredom, after a while, turns into disengagement. And they start looking, who can I go beat? Or let's take belief, which I happen to have in my top 5. And I can talk about how my belief kind of unwielded my rack space time. But that is, belief is the strength of having priorities and core values and having to have your internal life match your external life.
Right.
And so and Graham gave the great example of belief is the one strength that will go to a board meeting and hear a strategic leader say something that does not sit well with them, and they will quit on the spot.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many people when I've coached through the last 10 years where I have seen belief in their top 5 and I've zeroed in on it and I said, tell me about a time you left a company because they asked you to do something that was against your values. And they all have a story.
Wow.
They all have a story to say, this is when I did it. Because for beliefs, it's either this is my value system or I'm hitting the road. So Graham, it was a great another example from Graham. And lastly, he gave me significance. Significance wants to be valued for the role they play. Right? Within an organization or within a partnership, they want to feel significant. They want to be the go-to person. They want to have a significant role in what's going on in a project. And if they feel like they have lost that footing of significance, they start to flounder and they're going for the next project they can feel significant in. And so many times that led them to leave Rackspace because the next significant thing meant outside the door. So he told me those 3 examples. I wrote them down. I internalized them. I thought about them for years. And after doing the 10,000 hours of strengths coaching, I've realized every one of the 34 strengths has to be obeyed. They all have needs. They're all hungry. Right. Even harmony is hungry. Right. The strength of harmony. Think about it. In a conflict, intense scenario, harmony just wants consensus. And if they finally realize, or that harmony finally realizes,
I'm never going to get it,
and consensus is not going to be a thing here.
Yeah.
They leave.
I'm gone.
Right. I'm done because this is wasting energy and it's wasting time. So every one of the strengths has a need, and you have to obey it. Done. So I sent you a diatribe about that in an email one time, and we were talking about what this podcast would be called. Yeah. And you called me immediately, which I'm I'm not used to you doing, Lorenzo, calling me immediately, and tell me what you said.
Well, so I love that email. I was reading, so I read the email, and I had never heard that story. And I had my own version of that, but it was only one part because I'll tell that story afterwards. But when you sent me the email, that line literally jumped off the page. It literally jumped up and hit me in the face because in the Brand Brothers world, that was a powerful microscript. It launched such a vivid story in my head of what it meant and what it was about. And I just went, that's it, because I have also felt that way. And also, anybody that has been that's been strengths trained and believes in it, you've felt the discomfort at one part. You maybe didn't leave the company, but you felt the tension of it. And I felt it as soon as I read that. And so I was so giddy because I thought, that's it, and it's so right. And also, one of the many reasons I love and playfully hate Graham is that these brilliant nuggets fall out of his pocket, and I'm like, that just fell out of your pocket, and this is a world-changing idea, and now we have to make a podcast out of it.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, and so to me, I was like, yeah, he strikes again 10 years later, through an email. But I totally agree with that. I remember one day I hadn't left yet, but every once in a while I would meet with Graham.
You hadn't left Rackspace yet.
Sorry, I had not left. I had not left Rackspace yet. But every once in a while I would go, and I was such a jerk. Like, I don't know how he put up with me, because I would meet with him and I would just vent. And there was 100 people I could have vented to, but I wanted to, because we were cubicle mates. And so I felt so entitled, like such a jerk. And I remember one time he said, "No, Lorenzo, there's a couple reasons why you'll leave the company. The first one is belief, because I have belief in my top 10. Mm-hmm. And he said, when you feel like the company is not, your values, you'll gone. He goes, but the other reason you'll leave is your ability to affect change is so great that when you feel like you can affect change, you're going to leave." And when I left, the belief was so weird, because the belief had transitioned from the naivety of work. I was 20 years old when I got hired, and I thought, we're going to make this amazing company and braid each other's hair forever. And I just didn't understand what going public really meant. And that's my fault, And so but now when you're in the shareholder world, it's a whole different ball game. And so my belief was like, well, we're not here to build this amazing company to retire at. We're here for shareholder value. And I really struggled with that, because I did not prepare myself for that. And so my belief was very agitated by that, which is really silly in hindsight, because being public is an amazing thing, and so much good has come from it.
Right.
But the second part this was the real reason I left, was the ability to affect change. And when I left Rackspace, I was at the highest point of my career. I was a director in project management. And I remember my manager, Michael Hardwick, pulled me into a meeting. He said, "Hey, the billing department has a complaint about you." And I was like, "Oh, of course they do." And he said, and I'm gonna sanitize this story for the kids, but they say you've been calling them names. And I go, "Yeah, because they won't change anything. We have all these amazing things that we're going to make their life easier, and they refuse to do any of them." And he's like, "Well, you can't call them names." And I'm like, "Well, I have to call them names because I'm so mad at them. And what happened was we had these amazing programs that were going to automate like 70,000 lines of data entry a week, and they were like, no, thank you. And I thought, and what they're worried about was, layoffs.
Right.
And we had a signed letter from our CEO Lanham at the time that said we will redeploy all these people. And to me, like the resistance, and because my Activator Restorative was just so potent, I was like, this is the right thing to do for our company. It's the right change. We have to make it. And you're not even giving me an answer. Just give me a stiff arm. And I just said, I will not be at a company like this, which is why henceforth I've only been at tiny little startups.
Where you can affect lots of change.
We literally go, hey, let's change the direction of the company tomorrow. Let's do that tomorrow or this afternoon.
Right.
Yeah.
But what self-awareness, right? That's a gift to know that this is the space that you're going to play the best in, and this is the speed of business you want to play in. And,
that's
right. Affect change fast. That's Activator Restorative.
Big time. And I remember when I met up with Graham several years later, and I told him I was going. I had gone to a startup. It had totally bombed and failed, and I was going to go work in hosting again, but I wasn't going to go to Rackspace. I was going to go to a competitor, and when I told him, I knew he was going to get mad. I said, "Don't get mad." He wasn't mad. He was very, he
was Graham.
He was Graham, and
calm.
But it's funny because the words I used weren't strength words. But I told him, I said, "Hey, Rackspace is huge," and I said, "I'm a hippie. I can't roll with a big company anymore." But what I was really saying was, I cannot be at a big company where change is difficult. I need to be at a company where change is within the hour. Like that's what I need. And to your point, I have to obey that. If I don't obey that, I will be miserable in the third meeting about the same thing, going through the process, which is why if I work for government, I mean, it'd be the worst thing. And so, but knowing that in hindsight, I realize, I love the big company experience, but the chances of me working for a big company for the rest of my life is just so small.
And I love that. I love that I get asked all the time. Especially when I'm on college campuses and we're talking StrengthsFinder, and then they stand in line to talk to me after my little spiel or my speech, and they're holding their little top 5 card, and they say, Kathy, what career should I go into? Here's my top 5. What should I go into? And I'm like, I don't know. What career do you want to go into? Really, and I hear you describing it in a way like there is not a perfect recipe for success of your top 5 strengths.
That's right.
But there sure is a perfect environment for that top 5 strengths.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
And so you've been thinking about ecosystem for a long time with Geekdom, and you think about partnerships and a bunch of the different board of directors groups and roles that you play. And you've kind of narrowed in on where you're going to be the best version of yourself based on your strengths.
That's exactly right. And I think it's not about your strengths equal this job. It's about whatever job you pick, there needs to be certain conditions. The environment and the conditions have to be a certain way for your strengths to flourish. And if the conditions aren't there, then you're going to obey your strengths and leave. Right. But you're looking for the conditions. It's not, it's like all, a ridiculous statement would be all sales guys have competition. That's not true, but I've noticed a lot of sales guys, and it's not to say that if you don't have a competition, you're not a sales guy. It's just saying that I've noticed that there are conditions where sales guys get to compete, like you said, then they gravitate to it because they're competing every month after month. They get to win. And that's really when it's done well.
Boom. God, there's a whole podcast on sales, strength-based selling.
Oh,
let's put it in the books for a future podcast, man. That's
right.
So good. Good. Well, I bumped into my own strengths and my own why I left Rackspace story. And my journey at Rackspace was not quite as long as yours. I worked there for 7 years, or short of 7 years, and was running employee engagement at the time of my departure. And what had changed for me, and to remind you all that my top 5 strengths are strategic, input, learner, belief, and maximizer. I joined the organization when I was 26 years old. I had 2 babies in that 7-year time period.
Yeah.
Different person. So my new life did not match my old priorities of workaholic, and loving. So my strategic input and learner loved Rackspace because I was learning. I was working amongst brilliance on a daily basis. I was excited about my work. I thought we were we were writing the book on HR. I knew we were doing things that Gallup wasn't doing themselves with StrengthsFinder. And we didn't care what Gallup was doing with StrengthsFinder. We basically took the gold of the StrengthsFinder assessment and made it our own and lived it and embedded it. And I mean, I had a basic blank check from the executive team to do whatever you can with strengths, because this is a cornerstone in our culture. You know, like, it was awesome.
That's awesome.
So why was I disengaged? You know, like, I found myself in 2012 being kind of disengaged at work, and I had a hard time understanding what it was at the time. All I could say was, I just want more. I just want more. I don't know what it is. I want more. And sure, there was organizational change. It's a startup. It was a startup that went public. So right. I don't think that I had ever gone any short amount of time at Rackspace where I did not experience a massive amount of change. Right. So it wasn't that there was a lot of change going on in the environment. What was it? It was inside me. And it took me until leaving Rackspace and a couple of, months before I left, where I just finally decided to go home and be a stay-at-home mom, which in my mind, I'm like, this is career suicide. Don't go home and be a stay-at-home mom.
Well, I mean, that's the brand, right? Yeah. The brand is you're going to go, you lose all your skills, which is ridiculous.
Whatever. It's, you shouldn't do that. But I just knew, and this is what the deal was. My belief knew when I was 18 years old, I was at Texas A&M. I was in a student government organization. They gave us these little index cards, and we wrote down our 3 core values. Everybody's got values. Identify them. Take the weekend leadership retreat. I didn't need a leadership retreat. I needed a pencil because I knew what they were. I wrote them down. That's awesome. My 3 priorities are God, family, and friends, and hard work, right? And so that was the priorities and my belief. So, I'm not everyone that has belief in their top 5 even have those core values. That just means they have values, right? Okay, so mine are very unique to me. Just want to make that completely clear. And what I found myself in 2012 was that I had a sick kiddo. She had ear infections constantly. I'm going somewhere with this story, I promise. There would be days where I would have sick baby at home and a day full of meetings that I kind of thought were BS.
Right.
Because I was getting pulled into other people's work, right? In a leadership role, you get pulled into like, hey, come meet with me so I can get your blessing on X. And I'm like, I don't really care about your X. So yeah, like that happened. And then one day I just woke up and realized, like, what am I doing? Like this, my belief is completely inverted. Hard work, was working tons. Family, my daughter was sick all the time, and I had basically pulled out of any service project I was doing because I was so busy at work. So I just kept trying to get balance, but balance in the wrong thing. Instead of putting more on the service stuff in my life, right, I just cleared it out to have more time for my 11 o'clock email addiction, basically, right?
Right. Well, so, you dialed up hard work. Right, totally. To the detriment of everything else.
Completely inverted my priorities. And they were in order from that, right? And, one, God, family, hard work. So my hard work bucket was very full. My family bucket, not so much. My maximizer was saying, you're not the best mom you could be at this point. And so I was, it was a struggle. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward to my last day at Rackspace. I go into Graham calls me into his office. Graham's people call me into his office, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Now, at this point, they already know you're leaving.
They know I'm leaving. Okay. My boss had sent the farewell, Kathy Kersten, thanks for all you did, email, and copied Graham. Graham calls me into his office, and is like, Kathy, I haven't seen you in months. What are you doing? Where are you going? And I'm like, Graham, I'm just going home to be a stay-at-home mom. And he's like, what are your top 5 strengths? And on his nifty whiteboard table, he writes my top 5 strengths out. And he's like, and he circles belief. And he's like, tell me about what's going on in your work right now. And, that's where I told him this, the truth. And I lied a little bit. I mean, there was some chaos in the organization. Yeah. I wasn't in love with the fact I had an interim boss at the time. And,
right.
And I was getting pulled to do work that I didn't truly believe in. But overall, I liked my job and I believed in what Rackspace was doing.
Right.
But more importantly than not, the fabric of who I was, my belief, was being violated every day. And so it was like this, I was tired of the priority negotiation or the value. Okay, no, I want to say that differently. a value negotiation.
Right.
When you are in a place of work and you have to negotiate your values on a day-to-day basis, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
And for someone with belief, you can't handle it. And the distance.
You're fatigued. You're emotionally
so tired.
fatigued.
Yes. So I took 3 months off, and then this guy, Lorenzo Gomez, called me and said, hey, you want to do a strengths workshop? And I said, heck yes. And I haven't stopped since in 5 years. So that's how it goes.
It's weird how I just show up in stories.
It's amazing. Like yoga or something. I don't know. What's his Yoda?
Well,
Yoda,
I mean, I'm more of a, Anakin Skywalker. But,
To learn more about Kathy Kersten, visit her website, kathykersten.com. That's KATHYKERSTEN.com. Obey Your Strengths is produced by Geekdom Media in association with Gameday Media Enterprises. Executive produced by Lorenzo Gomez, John Garcia, and Michael Argent.